Welcome to FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Sebastian Fox.
And I'm Tony Sherman. Each video we take a chosen movie and lead a discussion on our thoughts and opinions.
We will be getting into the characters, plot, and technical achievements with no regard for spoilers.
So if you haven't seen this movie and don't want to hear said spoilers, you have been warned.
Today's movie is Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is a movie that came out in 2017, directed by Denis Villeneuve, composed by Benjamin Wallfisch and Hans Zimmer, and it stars Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford, Ana de Armas, Robin Wright, and Jared Leto.
And Mackenzie Davis, who spoilers, or well, not really spoilers, I guess we've talked about it already, but in the another movie coming up, Martian, is also portrayed there. We have a couple people in this movie who we've already seen, or we've seen in these movies, and maybe our audience will have seen the movie already. We've seen these people as well.
Yeah.
So, it's very interesting opening to this movie. We start off with the text. And then we see an eye.
Yeah.
And I feel as if that's definitely a symbol, this symbol of, of looking into the eyes of people is something that's kind of carried throughout the movie.
Yeah. Especially with the serial numbers, like below the eye.
Right, yeah. So that's something that carries throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, do you know whose eye that is? I didn't actually look into that.
I'm not sure. It seemed to me, when I was first watching it, that it was going to be Ryan Gosling's. That was Kay's eye.
Yeah.
But once he comes into the movie, we see he's flying in the ship, and it looks like he's asleep. So his eyes closed. So who that first eye is, that very kind of vibrant green-blue color of the iris, is not sure exactly whose that is. So that's something to maybe the audience can look into that and inform us.
So pretty early in this movie, Kay gets to this farm out in the middle of nowhere, and we get a cameo by Dave Bautista.
Right.
Did not know he was going to be in this movie.
Yeah.
First time I saw it.
Yeah, it's funny when apparently like a bunch of promotional material had Jared Leto and Bautista and Harrison Ford and all of these big name actors and actresses who are going to be playing big roles in this movie, and then they're only kind of in a few scenes, or they're only in one act of the movie. So it's funny, but I feel like that's kind of the way it goes a lot of times in a lot of movies, that we get these people who come in for only certain portions of the story.
But this movie especially is very focused on just Kay.
Yeah.
You kind of get love throughout the movie. You see what's going on with her, but it's very focused on one character.
On this one character, right? Yeah. There's a lot of focus on Kay, especially when we are trying to figure out who he is, what really is his background. Is he this human-born replicant, or is he a replicant-born replicant?
Yeah.
Who is this person? What kind of background does he have? And so it's kind of a little bit of a mystery through much of the film of, does he know who he is, and how do we as the audience try and learn more about him as we're going?
Yeah. So one thing about this movie that I really like is the way that it handles telling the audience certain information. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it doesn't tell it straightforward. It respects the audience, and it kind of lets you work it out. Yeah. Like throughout the entire movie, it doesn't tell you like how replicants are different from humans. Yeah. But you can see just like through small things that Kay does, that like he's like reading the DNA test really fast, and
Yeah.
He like smashes through walls a few times. So that he's durable.
Yeah. It doesn't treat the audience as, children that need to be told every little detail, that we can pick up on these things that are happening in the movie and draw inferences and draw our own conclusions. So right at the very start, I'm not sure, is this police officer's K a replicant? Is he human? What's going on with this person? And during the fight scene with Bautista, I can't remember Bautista's character's name.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's so terrible, right? We see him get bashed against a wall several times and then pushed through this wall, and so it's obvious. Okay, well he's not human. We can figure that one out. We don't have to be told any more blatantly than that he's going to be a replicant. But like you're saying, what does that mean to be a replicant? So how does that make them different from a human? They still leave that open to the audience to figure out. So how do they heal? How do they take that kind of damage? How are they repaired and all of these kinds of things? Their capabilities is left open throughout the film, that we can fill in those blanks as we see the film unfold.
Yeah. Although doing that where you're kind of trusting the audience to figure this stuff out can sometimes not go quite as well. Because also in this movie, Jared Leto's character, he's kind of the villain of the movie, the businessman. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, he's blind and he uses this chip with these floating cameras. And I've heard people talking that they didn't really understand what was going on there before.
Yeah. When I was watching it, my impression was that he's this person who wants to augment humanity. So my impression was he did something himself to his eyes to try and change the way that he can see the world. So my impression was that maybe there wasn't some kind of illness or something that happened that caused him to go blind, and maybe it was more of like something of his own volition. He chose to do it. But again, like you said, leaving it a little bit ambiguous, we can then try and draw our own conclusions of what his reasoning might be for what exactly happened.
Yeah.
Another showing versus telling that I picked up on in that opening kind of setting, that is also kind of a neat editing kind of camera work. When Kay first walks into this farmhouse, my impression of it is a very old-timey, kind of run-down farmhouse. We have these wooden walls, and we have this old beat-up piano.
Very rustic.
Yeah, very rustic. And we see Ryan Gosling's character walk in on the left side of the screen, the left side of the frame, and then the camera cuts, and we have this lit up, flashing green and red and blue lights, this panel.
Yeah.
So even though we see this is this very rustic, very beat up, really old kind of home, there's clearly some kind of futuristic kind of technology that's still at play, even out here in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. Some connections that I made to this protein farm that we open the movie in. We see this, the world has kind of gone into this post-apocalyptic kind of setting.
Yeah. There's
very little greenery, if any. We see a dead tree there by this protein farm. And in my mind, I'm seeing the moisture farm from Star Wars Episode 4. So it's kind of an interesting parallel to... We have Harrison Ford's character in both of those movies, and we see kind of an interesting parallel with this desolate world where we're having to farm maggots and worms and stuff for protein, and then this desert world of Tatooine where we need water, so we have this moisture farm. So an interesting kind of parallel between those two settings.
Yeah, I think that especially like with things like the protein farm, this movie definitely has a very good job of world building.
Yeah,
Of just kind of making it feel lived in. Just with they do have small things that are just on screen for a second, but it has these technologies that makes it just feel more fleshed out.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that, like even going into the city, and we have the camera kind of zooms through several of these different buildings and these different apartment complexes and all these different other flashing lights and all this fancy kind of stuff. We get just these little snippets of life throughout this city that they're in. So we see a very fleshed out, very full kind of location setting. And in my research of looking up some information about the setting design, the how they created those pieces, a lot of it was actually made. It wasn't, some of it wasn't CGI. It was actually models of buildings that they made, and it made me think a lot of like the Lord of the Rings, how a lot of those kinds of buildings in Minas Tirith and Helm's Deep and these other locations were also actually made and modeled to really add to that realism, add to that kind of factor.
So one interesting thing about how this movie is done is it's a kind of a sequel to the original, but it doesn't. It's not like a traditional sequel. It has, it brings back Harrison Ford and some of the aspects of that, of everything from the original movie. But this is very much a standalone. Yeah. A new, like following a new character and all that. It's in the same world, but it's not really a sequel.
A new story. Yeah. So it's different from where we're continuing the same kind of story with the same character. It's the same story, just continuing it from another perspective, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I think it definitely does a really good job of continuing all of the themes from the original.
Sure. Yeah. So like even some of the themes from the first one, where we have a lot of these, can we tell the difference? How do we tell the difference between human and replicant? And we have a lot of the same kind of ideas in this film as well, like the same kind of...
What makes them different?
Such,
because in this one, it is easier to tell who's human and who's replicant. Even Wolf even says something about that.
Right, yeah.
But it still continues that same sort of... I think it's interesting how people treat the replicants, how they just treat them like they're less than, calling them skin jobs and all of that.
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of an interesting hierarchy that we get, where we still have, well, of course, humanity's on top. We're the best, right? I mean, where else would we go? So it's a very kind of narcissistic placement there, and so then we have these replicants below that. Yeah,
I found it interesting with Robin Wright's character, especially because she seems kind of understanding of what replicants are and what they're, but she's still, like Kay starts talking about souls and like how things that have, to be born is to have a soul, is what he says, and she says you've been getting along fine without one. Like she's nice to the replicants, but she still
sees that
disconnect. Yeah,
exactly. So like still sees that, well, you're not human. You don't have a soul. You are something different. But I'm still going to be courteous to you, and it seems almost as if she's flirtatious towards Kay in some of the scenes. So there's clearly that chemistry. There's clearly that relationship between the two, some kind of relationship between the two of them, but she still sees him as below her. So both in terms of human versus replicant kind of relationship, and also as kind of a boss-subordinate kind of relationship, where she has that kind of control and kind of power over him. So it seems as if she really wants to play off of that to some degree.
Yeah.
Another interesting tier to the hierarchy is looking at Joy and looking at how K, a replicant, has this other kind of AI that he interacts with and he has a relationship with. He cares for this AI, which in the movie and a lot of the other characters see it as just another product.
Yeah.
How do you enjoy Wallace's product, this AI that they've developed? And it's supposed to be this thing that's not even really at the same tier as a replicant would be, but Kay treats this person the same way that he would anyone else. So it's a very interesting kind of interaction, whereas the rest of the world seems to have these clear-cut lines between these hierarchies, between these people, replicants, and products, things, so to speak.
Yeah. Although throughout the movie, he does sort of, like when other people bring up that she's a product, he does kind of agree with them in that sort of, like he'll say that he's enjoying the product and say that she's very lifelike.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, him and Joy is kind of the only healthy relationship he has throughout the entire movie. So I get that he kind of latches onto her and pretends that she's real.
More real. Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
So earlier you compared this movie to Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, with the opening being sort of similar location.
Yeah.
I think this movie also has some similarities in that it kind of has this sort of hero's journey, sort of chosen one type story going on.
Definitely.
But I think this one is very interesting because in the end, you find out that Kay isn't actually the chosen one. It's not really a hero's journey. The movie is really all about the Dr. Anna Stelline, because she's the actual
child. Yeah. It's interesting how the movie starts off and Kay is a very standoffish. He does the job and is kind of very cold when it comes to that. And then he's learning more about some of these ideas and sees, oh, maybe I am someone special, and then realizes, oh wait, no, I'm not, it wasn't me. Wait, what's happening? And then goes on to see, well, even if I'm not the chosen one, so to speak, even if I'm not this special child, is there a way for me to still become someone, something special? Is there a way that I can still do something that would matter? So it's kind of an interesting kind of dynamic there where he tries to fulfill something regardless of what his birth would make him, so to speak. Yeah. Which,
when he was picked up by the resistance, the replicants out kind of that were trying to overthrow the natural or the order of what's going on here. The leader gave him the line of, "To die is the most human thing we can do." Yeah. Or whatever. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So definitely playing with these ideas of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have a soul? We have all these different ideas being tossed around and all these phrases and words and terminology that all kind of play around the same idea. So these replicants are alive, but do they have a soul? Are they human? And so trying to still say, just by dying for a cause that you believe in would be what makes you human, would be what makes you something special. So Kay's character going on to try and do whatever he can to reunite a father with his daughter to whatever end that is for the Resistance's aid. Yeah. So we see him trying to work towards that. A lot of the characters come to the conclusion, somewhat natural conclusion, that, well, the replicants, they're a created being. They're not human. They weren't born, so they don't have a soul.
Yeah, even the replicants themselves seem to mostly believe it.
Mostly believe that, yeah. I mean, it seems like a natural, logical conclusion, but going to a previous film that we've talked about already, The Iron Giant, we have some lines that might shed some differing conclusions, differing evidence.
Yeah, in this movie, Kay said to be born is to have a soul, and then in The Iron Giant, Hogarth said to the giant, you're made of metal, but you have feelings and you think about things, and that means you have a soul.
Right.
So it's this interesting kind of difference of your actions mean you have a soul versus what you are kind of born as.
Yeah. It gets into this pretty deep kind of philosophical ideas of what makes us, where does our identity come from? Is it something that we're born with? Is it something that we do to make us our identity? There's like these lines of thoughts become ideas, become actions, become who we are.
Yeah.
And then we have these ideas of this nature versus nurture. This thing is innate in us, so that's how we are to be, or is it something where, yes, we're maybe born a certain way, but then what we learn through the process of growing up, it can then go on to change and define us.
Yeah.
So,
I thought it was interesting taking Kay's line and putting it in The Iron Giant of to be born is to have a soul, because Hogarth definitely doesn't believe that, because the giant definitely wouldn't have been born.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, so we see very differing ideas, very differing opinions on this idea. Yeah, so it's not not something that we necessarily have any clear conclusion on, but definitely seems as if there's more to the replicants and there's more to the Iron Giant than just what they are physically. So it seems to lend itself to imply that maybe there is some deeper connection there.
Yeah. This movie is very beautifully shot, just in the shot composition and the colors that it uses and everything.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that kind of each setting in this movie had kind of its own color scheme.
Right.
Where when Kay went to Vegas, it was very orange. Like even the air had this heavy orange dust in it. Yeah. And then like the cities were a lot more gray with the neon in there.
Neon flashing lights and stuff like that.
And then even like the opening was a lot more blue at the farm.
Yeah.
So I kind of like this, how the different settings have a different feel to them, even through the color scheme.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know the director has mentioned in some interviews about how he wanted to portray different ideas and different emotions through those different colors, and it definitely does come through that we, just by changing some of these different colors, we get different ideas, different feelings, different connections to these scenes and to these settings. Again, I think that opening scene is so fascinating. Really kind of stuck in that one a bit, but we see Bautista's character entering into this home, and we have these orange and yellow kind of lights right there at the entryway. And then the actual home itself is a lot more of these browns and beiges and grays and these kind of more rust kind of colors. Yeah. So we see a very interesting change, a transfer between here at the entryway, it's a lot more technological and futuristic, and then that's his home. This is a person who is trying to remove himself from those technologies and that he used to be a part of potentially. Yeah. So returning to these more muted, more homey kind of colors, and less of this oppressive grays and oranges that are a little bit harsher, maybe.
Yeah, another thing visually interesting about the movie is the special effects, especially surrounding the character of Joy. I like how they're done.
Yeah.
Because like when you first see her, she's kind of
like a projector, kind of.
She's kind of fading in and out a little bit. Like you can see things going through her. Like Kay starts smoking, and you see the smoke kind of pass through her. And when she goes up onto the roof, the rain's going through her.
Yeah.
But then it starts. The computer starts compensating for it.
Yeah, and so like it's almost as if there's a physical thing there. You can still see through it, but it's as if the rain is holding on her arm. So it's a very interesting way that they portrayed this non-physical but partly kind of real kind of character. So it's very, very different.
Even just the interactions between Kay and her, like there are some moments where like she like lifts his hand up to her face, and like just doing that technically is very hard because both actors have to have their hands doing the same thing, but they can't actually be standing next to each other
in the same exact space like that. Yeah, so very, very interesting technically. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and definitely that kind of hits its peak in a scene halfway through when Mackenzie Davis's character comes in, and the three of them kind of share this moment, and just Mackenzie Davis and Ana de Armas are kind of taking up the same space, overlapping.
Yeah. So it's a weird kind of. It's this. They talk about how they had to sync, and then they kind of connect, but then their movements, even beyond that syncing, don't always perfectly match up. So it's very interesting where you see one person moving and the other one's trying to stay connected and stay within that movement. So it's a very interesting kind of scene where we have that technical kind of development. We also have the symbolism. Like in the first movie, we had rain was a big symbol. And in this movie, we have a lot of snow that kind of also portrays a lot of that symbolism. We have in the ending, one of the ending scenes, we have Kay maybe fatally injured and is lying on the steps of this building, and there's snow falling all around him, and he's not the child, he's not special, he's not really anyone in some people's eyes, so to speak, but he's able to be there to interact physically in reality with the snow, whereas the character Anna, who is this special child in this human replicant born child, is in that next scene also interacting with snow, but it's this memory snow, it's this imagined snow. So we have that kind of symbolism of, well, we have this person who's not supposed to be special, who's not this child, who's the chosen one, but is able to be in the real world and have an impact on the real world, whereas we have this person who is this chosen one, this child, who is isolated, who's cut off from the real world, and her only interactions are through these memories and through these imagined kind of things that she creates. So it's an interesting dynamic between those two. It's going to be very interesting to see. I know that there are a lot of, in between the original Blade Runner and this movie, Blade Runner 2049, there were these little shorts and things like that they released to try and continue to flesh out and build out some of the story in the world. It'd be interesting to see whether through some of these other shorts or through another film, maybe a few years down the line, a third film where we then go in to see, well, will this character be able to have some kind of impact, have some kind of role outside of just this this bubble that she's allowed to stay in. We also see another symbol that you actually mentioned to me that I didn't make the connection until after the movie, once we realized that Anna is supposed to be this child, that the first time we see her, she's surrounded by this forest, this green, this fly insect thing.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm seeing this. I'm like, oh my goodness, so much green. This is exciting. We haven't seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And then it was just fake. It wasn't even real. But you were telling me this connection of what we see when we see green there, that even though it was imagined, the only other time that we see this green.
Any live plants is at the very beginning over the grave of her mother.
The mother, yeah. So we see the flower and we see these greens that she's designing. So both times that we see some kind of live plant or some kind of live living green thing, it's connected to this child, this being that was born. So we see kind of that rebirth and living kind of sense symbolized through that greenery. So I thought that was a pretty fascinating connection there.
Yeah.
One thing that I really enjoy about the music, I've listened to Hans Zimmer in all kinds of different movies and enjoyed lots of his music. Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Benjamin Wallfish. I didn't realize all the other movies that he had also worked with, whether he's working with Hans Zimmer, working by himself on some of these movies, but a lot of the music that they used in this film brought about the same kinds of emotions that I was getting through some of these other movies like Interstellar and Inception, where it's this very large, booming
it's not as melodic as some of the other scores.
It's exactly. Yeah, it's less melodic, and there's not necessarily a clear motif or theme potentially through it. But there's
builds this like really big ambiance.
Exactly.
Sort of
yeah, it's this kind of like ambient where you can feel the music, and it almost feels as if it's something part of the movie more than just this music that's fitting over top of the movie. So it is a very different kind of feel. Same kind of things with the music than in Dunkirk. So it's very, very, very nice. It kind of makes me want to wish I'd been able to see this movie in theaters to have gotten that kind of that physical feeling to being able to hear the music through those speakers. I'm sure it would have been a very interesting time. Yeah.
All right. That'll do it for this video. We would like to thank Mill Eastup for creating our theme.
And join us in the comment section below to go over any questions, add to the discussion. I know there's a lot more to the world of Blade Runner, some of the shorts, and even the first movie that we would love to continue talking about in the comments below.
And also subscribe so you don't miss our next video, which will be next week, where we will be discussing The Martian.
This has been FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Tony Sherman. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Fox, and we will see you in the next video.